Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 17th edition of the Galen Data Medical Device Innovation Webinar Series. I'll be your host today. My name is Dwayne Mancini. I'm the founder of Project Medtech and host the Project Medtech podcast. Today, we'll be sitting down with Dave Ferrera, the other gentleman on the screen here, from RC Medical for a discussion about building your team as a medtech startup executive. It's a crucial step to ensuring the success of your company. But first, we're going to do a few housekeeping slides and some information on Galen Data. Galen Data is the cloud for medical device makers. The Galen Cloud provides a configurable platform for device-to-cloud connectivity that is compliant to FDA, HIPAA, and CE mark standards. Built on 40+ years of collective experience developing compliance systems in the medical device industry, the company's goal is to make medical device cloud connectivity available to all at a fraction of the cost while shaving months off the development timeline. So that being said, I'd like to welcome our guest, Dave Ferrera, currently the CEO of RC Medical and 8-time entrepreneur, which is pretty incredible. So we're really happy to have him here. But Dave, welcome to the webinar. And if you can give a brief intro to yourself that I didn't cover right there, that'd be great.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'm really happy to be a part of this and participate in our talk today. Yeah, I'm a father of 3, originally from Massachusetts. I live in Southern California. I got involved in the medical device business when I was in college in the late 80s, when my grandfather died of a stroke, and there wasn't really therapy for him at that time. And that got me into making catheters early in my career at Impra, which was in Tempe, Arizona, which later became part of Bried. I then went on to make catheters at Boston Scientific in Watertown, Mass, and then their R&D facility in Natick. It wasn't until '97 that I partnered up with another business person and a physician to start Micris Endovascular, which enabled us to make embolization coils to treat brain aneurysms. We were a competitor to Target Therapeutics, but that kind of launched me into my career of becoming an entrepreneur and working with physicians to help them solve problems that they have, create solutions, and led me to this, to RC Medical, and we're a medical device venture studio here in Southern California that continues to just work with physicians that have problems in the interventional radiology market, primarily neurovascular, and we stay in our lane, catheter-based therapies or diagnostics that we can get to market based on the skills that we have. So happy to share my experiences, and I continue to do this with my team. We have a lot of fun. It's not without challenges, but when you succeed, you're able to enjoy it more.
Yeah, no, so this is great. So you and I have talked on my podcast before. We had a pre-call for this, right? And so for those who don't know, right, you had 5 companies previously that you've kind of exited and moved on from, and now you currently at RC Medical have 3 new ones that you have going all at one time, right? So something that's interesting when you talk to someone like that is, it's okay, wow, 8 times, right? This is your 8th company, and those stats are amazing. But what I found interesting was that the first time we talked, you instantly talked about team, right? Well, yeah. So I do this, and here's what the other people around me do. And I think a lot of people just maybe don't think that person's going to bring up their team right away, right? So that's what we want to have you on to talk about, is building this team. How's it successful? So let's start with at a foundation level. When you're putting together you got the next idea, you got the next product or next idea for a company, who's that team around you, and what's your role within the team?
That's a good question, and it took me years and years to understand what that early stage team needs to look like. And I do this with physicians initially, because they do have the problem and sometimes they have a solution. But But early on before the company starts, you have to have that idea and make sure that it is a big idea that there's a market for. It could be a problem that only a few people have and it's not really marketable, but it's when you find that problem and solution where the market's been begging for it, you just have to really understand it and jump in. So I'm fortunate to be part of a very complementary team where I have a partner that is excellent at R&D. I have a partner that's excellent at manufacturing, and I have a partner that's really excellent at the regulatory strategy. So I already have that in place, and I'm biz dev. I'm the idea guy. I was once called the truffle dog. I can sniff out ideas with great physicians, and okay, now we have something. So now we know how to design it, make it, and get it approved. But you need that first person to make the prototypes. So the first person that we always seek to hire if we don't have is a good engineer or technician that can understand or translate the problem to solution and make it a reality. Because raising money is hard enough, but if you have a prototype, if you've already reduced the idea to practice, you have the prototype, then okay, then this could work. There's a lot of potential. Investors will then believe that you have the team. Instead of having this idea and how much the solution could solve a problem, and investors want to know, okay, who's going to make this? Who's going to design it? Who? Sometimes they don't even care what the solution is. It's okay, you have the people that can do this? Yeah. So for us, when we're making a catheter, some device, we need a person that can actually make the product. And then that's how you get going. The first product or prototype may not even be functional, but you're going to work with it and show people. This is what I did in Toronto last week. I went to go see a physician advisor, co-founder, brought several prototypes, and we destroyed them all. And we learned so much. Some of them were too soft, some were too stiff, some weren't visible enough. But we now know the next version of prototypes, but we have a person that can make those. So for me in medical devices, it could be different in these other industries, but for me in medical devices, we need people that can make the product, and that's kind of your get going.
So on the making of the product, a classic debate for startups is, okay, well, do we bring that person on as an employee? Is it something we subcontract out? Do you have an opinion one way or the other on that?
I've done both.
Okay.
I'm at the fortunate stage where I have employees that can do the prototyping, but I kind of look back at a company we started called Mindframe in 2007, where the incubator already had several employees. They had the employee that could design. They had the employees that could get the regulatory approval, but we didn't have a person that could make the prototype. And I hired a friend as a consultant to actually begin prototyping until I could find the right technician to hire. I mean, that adding to that team early stage, I actually want to have that person become an employee. But I understand in many cases, entrepreneurs don't have the resources to hire an assembler, to hire a technician. Then there's lots of contract manufacturers out there that are able to do it. Unfortunately, like in my field, in neurovascular, a lot of the contract manufacturers are highly skilled in cardiovascular or in peripheral vascular. And I'm sure if anyone's listening here that have built prototypes in our field, you'll go to these companies and it just doesn't work for several iterations because the skill or knowledge to make a device to go into the brain, it just isn't there. So I always like to hire that assembler, that technician first. They're not expensive. You're not paying these people $250,000 a year. You're going to pay them very, very well and give them stock options. But that knowledge that they're going to gain from knowing how to design and make that device, you want to keep that and build on it. And sometimes you just don't have that at a contract manufacturer.
Okay. So your role as CEO in this is obviously, so it's business development. I'm starting external, right? Raising capital. I want to get to that as well. But in terms of your internal role, I guess it's like almost like what I call internal business development, right? Making sure these various pillars you say are so important are talking and working together. Um, First of all, is that accurate, right? Is that kind of how you see that role?
Yeah, I mean, internally, I'm either the cheerleader, the visionary, the strategist. I mean,
Right.
I'm not at my desk writing manufacturing procedures
Yeah.
or writing SOPs.
Yeah.
I mean, I manage by walking around.
Hmm.
I'm in my office, but yeah, I I want to make sure that people are comfortable failing,
Yep.
making mistakes, because it's when you make the mistake and understand why, that's how you get that knowledge and do things better. Maybe you don't make the same mistake again. Well, I hope you don't. But
Right.
you know, and that builds a lot of trust
Yep.
amongst your colleagues.
Right.
Hey, okay, well, this person made that product before, they know how to do it. And it
Hmm.
also makes them accountable. Hey, I made a mistake. I have to tell people now because I think you might learn something here. So it holds you accountable. So it's, I think it's a big part of a CEO's role. Yeah, provide vision. Where are we going? How are we going to get there, and why? But it's also important to let or allow people to make mistakes so they can learn. Because we had a holiday party about a month and a half ago, and I don't remember where I learned this. I might have learned this from Guy Kawasaki, and it was kind of these circles. And there was there was the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the out of control zone. And we learn so many things, it becomes part of our comfort zone. That's our wheelhouse, right? I want people to continue to learn, but I want them to be almost on the edge of out of control, straddle those two lines, always be testing yourself. What's next? Making mistakes and figuring it out, and it becomes part of the comfort zone. So that's kind of how I want people to behave here. Is I love the comfort zone, but the comfort zone's boring. It makes you mediocre. Okay, I want people to have conflict. Okay, that leads to greatness. And you're only going to have conflict is if you're making mistakes. I don't know what's next. Well, you'll never say that again once you learn it, right? So that becomes part of the comfort zone. So
Right.
I want people to strive for greatness. It's the same thing in sports. You got
Hmm.
guys like Tom Brady. I won't talk about him too long, but I mean, I know he lost this weekend, but 44 years old, and he had a game-winning drive. But you're playing the Rams and you're playing against Cooper
Yeah.
Cup, Stafford. But he's been able to sharpen his knife so many ways and make other people around him better, greater. I think you can do the same thing in business, and especially at a medical device company.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get to, I guess the entire time you'll be littering in how to maintain culture, a culture of excellence, right? And this is one example. One thing I wanted to go back to real quick is so you talked about the prototyping, and then the other one of the other team members was manufacturing. Can we actually make this? How important is that interaction at an early stage? Because I see that disconnect sometimes. Is people make a prototype or make a solution to a problem, and then they quickly realize it's not manufacturable. So is there a lot of interaction there at the beginning phase of this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get to market,
Hmm.
and you want to get to market with right product that solves a problem. Your solution is the product that somebody has to commercialize.
Hmm.
And if it costs you $1,000 to make, you can only sell it for $1,000. There's not a lot left over um, to pay salaries or whatnot. So I mean, that's an extreme example. Um, you have to be designing for manufacturing, but designing with the margin in mind. Back to Mindframe. We had a solution which eventually became the stent retriever. It was a neurothrombectomy device using a temporary stent to grab a blood clot, remove it to restore blood flow in the brain. And we wanted to make something novel and unique that was easier to use than what we saw the competition eventually having. And our competition was Covidien. They had a device called the Solitaire AB, which was designed for aneurysm, not for ischemic stroke. Their device went through an 027 catheter. We made ours to go through a 21, but we wanted to make it go through an 017. It'd be easier to use, it's faster, it's safer, it's simpler. The company making the nitinol tubes, they weren't ready to launch a 0.3 millimeter hypotube yet. So we had to wait. We could have paid for them to sell us the tubes, which would have probably been $50 a foot, and to laser cut them would have been even more expensive. So we had to go to market, or say our first demand, with the 021 device, which wasn't incredibly competitive. It wasn't until a year later we were the first ones to get the 0.3 millimeter tube, made the 017 compatible device, and that became Capture LP. And then our patents issued, and that's when Covidien made the acquisition. But we couldn't go to market what we wanted because it wasn't cost effective, it wasn't feasible, so we had to wait and just get to market to prove our solution worked, and then eventually get to market with the technology once the cost came down.
I'm on mute. Interesting. So let's and what was the third piece of that team member? So it was the manufacturing, the design, yourself, and then what was the fourth?
The commercial team.
Oh, the commercial team, right?
So,
Okay.
Yep. So
our
commercial partners were primarily distributors in Europe, and when you're making a product here and you don't have a direct sales force, you have to sell to a distributor at a transfer price. And say the end user price is $1,000. We have to sell to the distributor at a steep discount. Usually sell to them for about $400, because now they have to put money into marketing and distribution. So there's a margin that's eaten up, and then they have to sell it, and what's left is their profit. So we had to make sure that we could make these devices for under $150 to sell them to a distributor for $400, so they could market and sell it to the market for, say, $1,000. So you've got to account for that. So we wouldn't have been in the market in Europe if our cost of goods was $500. It just would have been impossible. So you got to be very aware of the price that it takes to get to market.
Is it even worth it as a startup to hire someone to do direct sales? I mean, or is distributor pretty much the only option at that point?
No, it is worth it. I mean, we had a country manager. Actually, at Mindframe, we had a direct person in Europe, but that person wasn't able to hire a direct sales force for quite some time. And it actually never happened. The company wasn't acquired before that even happened. But you tend to want to hire one direct person that's in a region, and then they can put together the distribution network. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to determine what order I want to do this in. Well, let's kind of talk about hiring, right? So this is your founding team generally, I'm guessing, right? I mean, this is the first people in. As your company grows, first of all, which roles are you hiring as you reach different stages of the company? And second off, I mean, how do you de-risk it, right? I mean, obviously, you're going to make bad hires as a startup sometimes, right? But you've done it 8 times, so apparently you have something in the secret sauce, something in your process that's enabling you to, pick good talent. Can you share some of those metrics? So I'm curious, right? Stepwise fashion is like, as you reach different stages, who you bring in, but what's that process look like?
Yeah, and I've seen this. We did that at Micros and at Microvention. I really learned a lot there. So when I went to Mindframe, I also worked with the founder of MTI and EV3. Early on, I said earlier, you want to create that R&D team that can design and build the first initial product. But you still have to have the relationship to the customer. And sometimes the entrepreneurs, they might have that, but it's not so strong. So you may want to bring in a commercial person that has that relationship and can speak the language with the actual customer, kind of in between the engineer and At Micros, we had a guy named Glenn Abello. He worked with Target Therapeutics, so he was a sales and marketing executive. He was brought on early as a consultant, but he knew the customers in Europe, and he was kind of the go-between me and the customer. And I ran the R&D team. And then when I went to Microvention, early on, the founders of Microvention hired Rich Capetta. He was a sales and marketing executive. He knew the customers in Europe. He used to live in Europe, although he was American. I knew doctors in South America, but he also knew the position. So the commercial team speaks a different language. They identify with the problem and solution differently than the engineering R&D team does. So you need the R&D team first, but you need that relationship to the actual customer. And you can survive that way until you get to a point of, say, design freeze. Along that path, you have to get to market. So getting regulatory approval is critical, whether it's in the United States or Europe, and that's usually the first two you go to, but now China is equally as important. That regulatory person could be a consultant, or if you're preparing for a trial, a PMA, you actually may want to bring on the regulatory person full time, because you'll be having pre-submission meetings with the FDA. You may need to do a trial in Europe to get CE marks. You'll be talking to the notified body. And then usually the regulatory person manages quality control and quality assurance. So, so you get your R&D team initially, that's always first. You may bring on a commercial person to help the relationship, but shortly after you get to design freeze, you're bringing on a regulatory and quality team. And then say you're running a trial, or say you're getting ready to submit for your 510K, you think you're going to get approval in 90 days, then that commercial person you brought on may start recruiting distributors in Europe, distributors in China, or a direct sales team in the United States. So that's kind of the high level evolution of the people that you're going to hire. And I think all along from day one, you're hiring a bookkeeper at a minimum to maintain the books. I mean, you're doing this for either an acquisition or for maybe an IPO. So that bookkeeper could evolve into a controller. The bookkeeper could actually be a consultant. That may become a controller. That may become a CFO, depending on how you start to commercialize.
Yeah.
And then, prior to getting to market, the commercial person may bring on a marketing director. So those are kind of the steps you follow.
Yeah. That CFO piece is important. It's something that I really wasn't too aware of, but the importance of it at an early stage, like you said, even if it's just a consultant, raising capital in your seed round, your Series A round, if you don't do it properly, could really screw up your following rounds, and that's a problem. Depending on how you did it, how you evaluated, what kind of investments you took, who you're going for next. I mean, you see horror stories like that as well, where they actually have a decent product, but they've almost become uninvestable because of a mistake they made in one of those early rounds. So
right.
I think, and there's a lot of people, selfish plug, Project Medtech included, where we have, some fractionalized CFO services we can offer, but that I think is super important. So I'm glad you brought that piece up. Let me ask you this. So you're bringing these people on. I think this is that $1 million question. What is that process? I mean, what are you looking for when you're bringing these people onto your team? I love what you said earlier, right, about the kind of culture and learning and kind of straddling the line there. But what are you looking for in the interview process? Because not to scare anyone more, right, further, but you make a wrong hire at Medtronic, there's buffer, right? I mean, it's not as big of a deal, right? You make a wrong hire at a startup medtech company that's in a Series A round, you can't afford 6 months and whatever that person's salary was. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, early stage, and gone through it several times and seen it done several times as even an employee. You pretty much know the skills that you want. And if it's an engineer or technician, they'll have a resume,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to hire within a network. Um, so it's best to get a person recommended or referred to you. And the person that's doing the referring, these are the traits I like to see. And um, you know, have they played sports before? Have they been on
Yeah.
teams? Okay,
Okay.
that for me is, and there's lots of questions you can and can't ask at an interview. I don't care if you're married or have kids. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't care. Okay,
Right.
it's nice. I like a family culture here, but I want to know: have you played sports in your life? Have you been
Hmm.
part of teams? Because if you're a part of a team, you know how to win, you know how to lose, you know
Yeah.
how to train. Okay, have you coached in your life? Have you volunteered AYSO? Have you coached a team
Hmm.
before? Because it doesn't mean you're gonna become a good manager, but then you know how challenging it is to manage people or be part of a team. Um, have you volunteered? I mean,
Okay.
these are all high level things that have nothing to do with your skills,
Right.
right? But it's part of a culture that we want, that we know works at
Hmm.
our company. You know, have you on a team? Have you coached? Have you volunteered? Have you done something selflessly? Because you're going to have to do a lot of that at the early stage startup.
Yeah.
Have you failed? Have you made mistakes? Have you admitted them? I mean, those are the things that I can tell they're going to make a good team player or they're not.
Hmm.
Okay, I never played sports in my life. I never had the chance. Okay, have you ever coached? Yeah, I actually volunteered to coach. Okay, well that to
Yeah.
me is, and this is after we've already seen the resume. So we already know that they have skills. And our assemblers and technicians, they go through it at very different interview process than say an engineer would. We put them in the clean room and they have to make something. They either have to solder, heat shrink, inspect. So, okay, you say you can do this, you did this at X, Y, Z. Okay, prove it in 30 minutes. It's easy. Now, you can't do that with an engineer. Hey, go design a widget and get it made. You just can't do that,
Right.
right? It's a little different, but there's different steps for certain levels of job function. If you're hiring a CFO, okay, that's pretty easy to check.
Hmm.
Uh, a LinkedIn profile, it's easy to get the resources, but okay, once you know they can do the job, what type of person are they? Because
Hmm.
we have a culture here, and sometimes you make a mistake and you have to deal with it swiftly. And
Yeah.
it isn't so much about terminating or firing someone. It's like, hey, this isn't what you're really good at. It isn't what you're really bad at, but let's make sure you do something that you can succeed at, that you enjoy doing. Or hey, this isn't for you, you're resigning. I'm not firing you, you're resigning. Unless you do
Hmm.
something that's egregious, which that's not going to happen based on our own interview process. But sometimes people are given opportunities that they're not ready for, um, or they just don't like,
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, to
Okay.
get that culture, we want team players.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That
there's
makes
ways
sense.
to figure that out.
Yeah. So what else in culture are you trying to instill as CEO around there, right? So you kind of talked about two main ones so far, right? Right. The first one was getting people outside that comfort zone, right? And challenging them. You've talked about the importance of team, right? And that's been littered throughout your entire talk so far is teamwork at the beginning, but teamwork as you grow, teamwork in the interviewing process. Are there other major things that you've come across? You said, wow, this is what RC Medical needs to be focused on.
Having trust and accountability.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, trust can be earned, but
Hmm.
in some ways, a small amount of trust just has to be granted. Hey, you made the cut. We trust you. Now let's build on that, and you have to be accountable. And you can hear about it, but you have to kind of see it and watch it and witness it. Um, and so once you have a team player that has built the trust with their colleagues and they become accountable, then that's an employee. And there's other intangibles, can't lose attitude. We're going to get it done. There's got to be a better way, or there has to be a way. Those are all things that you can't put your finger on it, but you can see it and witness it over time.
Hmm.
Um, but of course, trust and accountability is always on the top, and sometimes it's given to people in small pieces, but they have to grow that, and you know,
Right. Okay. So let me ask you this too, and not just from an investor standpoint, right? But from an actual just overall company perspective. A lot of people will take a look at what you're doing, right? And having three separate products, or I think they're three separate companies, right?
Mhm.
All with different products, going to going through that development and go to market strategy and whatnot. Um, Obviously you don't, but do you get pushback? Or obviously you don't feel this way, but do you get pushback from investors, others in the space that, I mean, Dave, how can you possibly, be doing three different things at one time? How could your team be focused on, three things? Doesn't that take away from certain aspects of it? I mean, what's your pushback there? Because I hear a lot of people who are like, you got to be all in on one thing, all in, and I certainly am not of that mindset. So you don't need to convince me, but for the people who think that, I mean, what's your argument back to that?
Well, I hear that 9 out of 10 times. You
Okay.
can't be doing more than one thing. You got to be all in. You got to act like your life depends on it. Um, and I understand where that comes from. Um, but when an investor that looks at our business model understands, we're staying in our lane, and we're staying in interventional radiology. We're not developing a COVID vaccine test or something else. We're staying in our lane, and they meet the team, and they realize how cross-functional we are, where there's not two or three CEOs here. you know I call myself a CEO, but I'm only doing a part of the job. They see the complementary team, and then they realize they've been part of investments before, and they see that there is ebbs and flows in time. There is downtime, and engineers can do more than one thing at a time. Now, I'm not saying our bandwidth is 10 companies. Right now, it's three, and I'm not the CEO of all three. I'm the CEO of one. I'm the chairman of a second, and I'm a board member of a third. But we all wear different hats when we need to. We all complement each other. But 9 out of 10 times, I can't invest in those three companies. I'll invest in one. Okay. And I'll only be the CEO of one, because I think our vision 2 years ago was that my partner Bill and I would be the CEO of several companies, and really not understanding or being sensitive to what the investor was actually thinking. You can't do that. And maybe they're right. Never done it before. All right, well then let's spread around the responsibility. Let's have one person be responsible for this company, one for that, and one for that, and we can be better board members. So we heard that and listened. Okay, let's do these three this way. And maybe we're just better board members, but we're still operating executives, but we're just better board members. So we heard that, and we listened, and we're not being too brash or arrogant, because we if we're successful, then okay, then this is a model that works. If we're
Hmm.
not successful, it's other people's money, and that's a huge responsibility, because it's not our company, it's our investors' company. And I stress that to our founders and to the investors, is as soon as we take $1, it's not our company. We have investors. We have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure we set goals and milestones and we hit them. Because if we don't, the next round of financing that we want to do, our valuation is not going to be there. It's going to take a hit. It could be flat or down. So let's make sure we have the team, and we listen to shareholders, we listen to our board. So yeah, I mean, what you said, I've heard, and we're sensitive to that, because we haven't done it yet. We've done all these in series. Now we're doing three in parallel. So let's make sure that we can do it and we succeed.
Yeah, no, really interesting. To me, The first time you explained this to me and what you were doing, it was like, well, great. It's an already proven team. Why wouldn't I want to invest in that, right? I mean, because you kind of outline there, right? Investors see that and say, oh, great, okay, well, they have a great team. Um, you know, the constant phrase is bet on an A jockey and a B horse, right? So
Hmm.
in this case, there's not just one jockey, there's four or five, right? So
Yeah.
so all on one team. So no, I appreciate that insight. Um, One thing I wanted to circle back to that I had written down, and just as a reminder, if you're listening in, feel free to drop questions over here on the right under the question section, and we'll get them asked. But Dave, something I wanted to ask you, right? So we talk about the successes and those types of things, but I know that I think you had shared with me that there was one company uh, that you had founded that wasn't successful, and I don't know if it was because of you didn't fully understand the problem, or it actually changed how the end user ended up using the product, and it actually eliminated the problem that was originally had. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the company, and
Hmm.
no, it is a black guy, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. It was called Nirvana. What a name for a company. Uh, maybe they already had the wrong name, but so Nirvana was a spin out or a spin newco out of Blockade Medical during the
Okay.
Bolt acquisition of Blockade. Bolt was excited about our embolization coil and our U.S. sales footprint.
Hmm.
They had a smaller appetite for the other three, uh, uh, you know, devices. One was an aspiration catheter. Another one was a device to treat vasospasm, and another one was just another intrasaccular device for aneurysm. So Nirvana was formed. I couldn't be an operating executive because I was the president of Bolt USA. Uh, so I had to, build a management team, assist the new CEO to raise the money, and that's what we did.
Hmm.
Um, and just things didn't
Pan
go
out.
well for maybe
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. I think at the high level, the management team seemed sound, but from the middle and low, I think the culture trickle down was very disjointed or disfigured.
Okay.
Um, and the board had some dysfunction to it. I was a part of that. I have to
Hmm.
take some ownership of that. There wasn't any cohesiveness. It seemed like there were very different objectives or goals. There wasn't alignment.
Hmm.
Um, and nonetheless, one of the products was able to be almost ready to get to market. It was an aspiration catheter. Balt came in to make an offer to do an asset sale, which they did the deal, and it was during the technology transfer and getting that to market where there was more dysfunction and failure,
Hmm.
resulting in Nirvana uh, going out of business, resulted
Okay.
in a lawsuit. Uh, Balt became the victor, but there wasn't a victor here. It was just a calamity of errors, which I hope to never see again, because the products were highly competitive, best in class or first in class, but
Hmm.
it came down to the team and the dysfunction and misalignment resulted in a failure. And I believe over $5 million was raised, and investors lost money. Some of
Yeah.
them were friends and family. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, that was so. It had nothing to do with the product or the solution.
Yeah.
It was the right product, right solution, wrong execution.
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of just goes back to, yeah, I'm sure that was a big learning experience, right? But it just goes back to what you've been talking about the whole time, which is how important that culture and team and being on the same project or same wavelength is, in terms of, where you see that vision going. So I appreciate
I
you
mean, it's hard
sharing.
to talk about, and
Oh
but
yeah,
when you have a front row seat, and there's only so much I can say. There's a lot that you just can't talk about. It's not illegal for me to say there was dysfunction and
yeah,
misalignment. I
right.
mean, that's the story of every failure. If you're a baseball team or a football team or your GE,
Yeah,
the reason there's failure, it's rarely the product or the strategy. It's the team and they're not aligned. It's classic, and
yeah.
that's what happened here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, look, it's I think sometimes, when I do these with people like yourself who have done this multiple times, right? It's so easy to talk about the successes, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's even easier sometimes, especially for like that first or second time entrepreneur who's only been successful. They're two for two, right? They're two for two, and it's easy for them to talk about pitfalls because they didn't actually fall victim to the pitfall, right? They had the
Mhm.
success coming out the other end there, right? But to actually hear someone who's done it five times on their eighth to say, yeah, hey, this is an example where we just weren't successful, we screwed up, right? And to reflect back on that, it's hard to talk about, but that's where people are going to learn. So I appreciate the humility in sharing that because it does stink to talk about. We did get one question. Well, we got two. One's more of a comment. Jeremy had wrote that he thinks I'm referring to the Caudy project, which I remember us talking about as well. Um, that was we talked about that in the podcast. But that was is that a different company or a different product?
Yeah, so that's catheter-associated urinary tract infection.
That's right.
That's not quite a failure yet.
Okay.
So um, that okay, so that didn't involve investors' money. That's our
Yeah.
own money. Okay,
Okay.
so I
Yep.
don't consider that really a failure. However, uh, that is a result of jumping into a market that you don't fully understand. Okay,
Yes. Okay,
so
that's right. Yep. I
a,
remember this story, but share, please.
so
Yeah.
a physician came to me, a really close friend at a hospital, and he's on the board of a hospital, and the CEO was upset about the CODI rate, and we have to stop this. There's got to be a better way. So he called me, and we talked about it, and we came up with, okay, if the urine has bacteria, maybe one way to prevent the urine from coming back in, if that's the issue, is to make a one-way valve. So we made a one-way valve that went at the end of the Foley catheter that drained into the bag. The patients are moving around a lot, and it's only one way CAUTI could happen, but we made a one-way valve. And then we invested, we made the valve. We even did a safety study at this hospital. We did 50 patients, so it
Mhm.
worked.
Yeah.
Not one got CAUTI. Um, we even were referred to the manufacturer of the Foley kit, talked to them. They didn't want it in their kit for a variety of reasons. It was going to raise the price, reduce the margins. And then I went back to the hospital and I talked to them and like, well, kind of remarkably, our CAUTI rate has dropped. Why? Well, what we think is happening is that the nurses are prophylactically treating the patient. So when they do the bacterial culture on the urine, if the bacteria comes back positive, but they don't have CAUTI yet, they prophylactically give the patient the medication, which will prevent the CAUTI, which is circumventing the solution. But hey, it worked,
Right.
and
Right.
it's
Right.
inexpensive, and the drug is, I don't know, $50. Hey, I would rather have that if there's a way to
Yeah.
treat it. So we went into a market not really understanding any of that, um, and the silver lining possibly could be that the valve we made, we may be able to use this in the veterinary care medicine
Okay.
for animals. So we're
Right.
still looking at that possibility, but it's not going to be a solution for COD. It
Yeah.
could have been,
Right.
but we
So
didn't know the market, and hey, it's only plumbing. Come on, it's a
yeah.
tube. But
Right.
that's in the simplest form. But
Okay.
that was I wouldn't say it's a failure yet.
Yeah,
I
but a
could be talking
lesson,
about this
but a
lesson.
lesson learned. What,
Yeah.
so how does that go to that team aspect of preventing it in terms of like, i- what would have caught that? Other than being an expert in the space, is it having that commercialization person to maybe translate what actually is going on or understanding that procedure, or is it somewhere else?
I think it was ego and arrogance. And now
Okay.
we stay in our lane.
Okay. That's easy.
Okay.
All
If it's not a catheter for interventional radiology, I can introduce you to
right.
5 other people that do that. So,
Right on. Okay.
uh,
All right. So one of the other questions we had, Dave, how do you, as someone with an innovative product idea, protect that product idea ownership in the initial stages as you partner with manufacturers and engineers to design and produce your prototype?
before you show your idea solution to anyone, you've got to file a provisional patent application.
Hmm.
And that's under the expertise of a patent attorney. Um, so you can go to any contract manufacturer, get them to sign an NDA, uh, and they're all trustworthy. But your solution could give rise to ideas to solve other problems. But if you file a provisional, a fairly broad provisional, that you convert to a patent at some point in time, you may get protection for this other idea that you inspired.
Hmm.
So, you know, so any before you talk to anyone, investors, uh, engineers, okay, that you know and trust, file a provisional patent application, and then you have that, anonymity for 1 year. No one has to know about it but you have it, and then you can sign your NDA and discuss with your contract manufacturer the idea you have, maybe how you want to build it if they have the skills to do that. Then during that whole process, they're making you prototypes. You can refine your invention. So when you convert that to the non-provisional patent application, all those things you learned in prototyping with this new supplier, you can put into the patent application. So that's kind of the benefit of filing the provisional. And then, hey, you build your prototypes, this thing doesn't work. They're like, all right, screw it. You can just abandon it.
Hmm.
Okay. No one knows any better. But all those things you learn to improve it, when you file for the patent, you get the benefit of that priority date a year earlier or 9 months earlier. So, and in the United States and also the rest of the world, it's first to file now. Where before 8 or 9 years ago, I forget the exact date, it was first to patent, and that's where all the fuzziness happened. You see people running around companies with their big black notebook that you'd have to make objective and notes and get 2 people to sign and date it and all that. Companies I used to work for, you look at certain people's books, there'd be blank pages everywhere. Why? So they could go back in and fill stuff in.
Yeah.
So they patented it before they actually patented it. Now it's first to file. So you file for a patent, you're the inventor on that date. It doesn't matter if somebody might have had the idea a day earlier or 10 years earlier. If you don't file for a patent, then good luck getting a patent and actually protecting your own invention. But
Yeah.
you got to file for that provisional and then convert it.
Okay, so I think this is a good lead into another question we just got in, and my comment to that would be there is if you talk to IP and patent attorneys, there is a difference between just someone who understands IP and patents and someone who understands IP and patent strategy, and I think that's really important too. There's a lot of good attorneys out there who can really help make sense of this, and that leads into this question, which I probably have a pretty strong opinion on just on my background. But Dave, I want to see your thoughts. Is do you see a difference in regulatory consultant versus strategist? Obviously, we want to get to market, but we also want to be successful, not just rush to market, but then can't differentiate us from other products on the market. Difficult to know when to hire a fractional person versus a full-time CRO/CCO. And I think what she is getting at is something we talk about on the podcast often, is You could go to a regulatory consultant and they will tell you, well, hey, I think if you change this, you can get a 510K and don't have to do a de novo. And while that might make sense in some cases, I always bring up the point, well, this could this could change a lot of your target market, your commercialization strategy, what you're actually trying to do. So I believe that's what she's getting at is, and she's they're 100% right, is there are questions, or there are consultants and strategists. So what is your take on that?
I was just going to give an example of almost something that you had just said. I think you need strategy, and I don't know how you know when you don't need it. I mean, I'm 54 now. I believe I know when I need strategy versus just go file a 510K on that guide wire. Okay. Um, Strategy for regulatory is as important as intellectual property strategy, is as important as commercial strategy. They're all value drivers. Um, Example, I was just going to say, we're developing a product for a brand new indication, which I'm not going to go into the details, but it's a brand new indication that physicians are presently treating off-label. They're struggling, but they're doing it in probably 2/3 of the cases. They're having success. So I like to go after the off-label uses and see if there really is a market. And if there is, okay, then we have a market. Let's see if we can get patents. But how are we going to get to market? So in this specific case, our idea was let's just get to market fast. No one knows how to do it but us. Let's just get a 510K. We'll actually go for a de novo. But if you go for a de novo, that could pave the way for everybody to get a 510K. Okay.
Right.
And then the barrier to entry is low versus a good example of this is Pipeline, which is a flow diverter in our field. They were the first to do a PMA to get an aneurysm device approved. And they own that market for the better part of 10 years, maybe longer. And I think people were kind of chuckling when Covidien, or maybe it was EV3, acquired Chestnut for 75 million up front and 75 million when their PMA was approved. So for $150 million, they didn't know it then. Maybe they did know, they had the foresight. They bought a $1 billion franchise because the
Hmm.
barrier to entry was so high. And that's strategy.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the same thing now with a device that's nothing's on indication, nothing's on label. If I go for a de novo and get it to market fast, okay, then anybody can do it. If I do a PMA, I just raise the barrier to entry. I'm going to own the market, or whoever acquires our company will have at least a 5 or 7 year head start.
Hmm.
So I think you have to know um, what your business plan is. And are you protecting the franchise? Then
Yep.
that's strategy. If you're just getting another guide wire approved or a catheter approved or an embolization quote, that's a 510K. Okay, go for it. But if it's a new indication, uh, sometimes you want to spend the extra money, the extra time
Yep.
to protect the runway. So
Yeah.
it really depends on what the product is, the market, and yeah, can you raise the money?
Hmm.
Too. I mean, there's all these factors, but I mean, I go with strategy 100%. On IP, I think the reason Mindframe was acquired in 2012 was the patents issued in 2011 because we went after the PPH process, the patent prosecution highway. We had filed for a patent in the United States, and our patent attorney knew this PPH program, if you can file a patent in a country such as the UK and it issues, then you go to the top of the line at the US Patent Office. That's what we did. We filed for a patent in the UK. The patent issued in 9 months.
Hmm.
9 months, it went right to the top of the heap at the PTO. They reviewed it. We had allowed claims in 90 days. A patent issued in
Yeah.
2011, and Covidien came in and began discussing the acquisition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, this is that question just reminds me pretty much why we have our project medtech advisory services, right? To help make sense of these different pillars of your company, right? And how they feed in. So I think that's a great question. I don't have too much more in terms of questions. I got most of mine out. Uh, I think I'm curious in the last 5 minutes we have here, Dave, is there anything else, you'd like to leave us with? Any other thoughts, anything we missed?
Well, I know we all work hard, and I think we all think our identity is what we do for work. As you get older, you tend to pivot. I really get involved in my community here in Orange County, and that means there was an old saying from Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts: all politics are local. Don't go to Washington D.C. to fix your problems in Leominster, Massachusetts. Okay, take care of your backyard. Volunteer, coach sports teams, be part of societies. That's, if you network, even outside of healthcare, you network when you're coaching your kids soccer, you'll meet some great people, and that's going to take you in another direction. Maybe you get another product idea, but you then make your community solid. And I've been studying and reading a lot about blue zones in the past 10 years. Not that I want to live to be 150, but I like the premises of the blue zones. They live to be over 100 years old. There's actually one here in Yorba Linda, California. But and the reason people live longer isn't because they run 5 miles a day or they don't eat meat and they're vegan. It's bigger than that. I mean, most of the people that are living, they walk to work, they live near their generations of families, which reduces stress. Yeah, they do have a glass of wine every day. A lot of it is stress reduction, but it's that daily keeping moving, the daily communication with your friends and family, and you're taking care of your backyard. So if I could leave people with that, take care of your community. And if you do that, then it just spreads and propagates. The state becomes better, the country's better, the world becomes better.
Awesome. But before we go, we did have two questions roll in as you're wrapping up there. One is, what is a mistake that is made early on that'll make a company fail? I think we've addressed that to a certain extent, right? IP strategy, regulatory strategy. Is there something else major that you see?
Hiring the wrong person.
Right. Okay, I like that. And then we had another question that is, what is the most exciting upcoming technology in the neurovascular space?
It's probably something I don't have a lot of knowledge about. It's that AR, augmented reality. That's the
Yeah,
combination of AI and VR. There's companies out there, robotics. When Siemens bought Corindus, I just saw a live coiling case in Toronto last week. The doctor was coiling with a joystick. So he was 20 feet away from the table, and he was coiling an aneurysm with a robot. So
crazy.
that was amazing. And I've heard about it. I've seen it I witnessed it live. The physician
Yeah.
wasn't wearing lead. He wasn't sweating. He's hanging out. So
Okay.
robotics and AR,
Awesome.
that's where our future is leading us.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, Dave, I really appreciate your time. Again, thanks to Galen Data for putting these on. I've been a part of this since maybe August or July, and these webinars are just fantastic. And I know I learn a ton from them. I enjoy them. I really appreciate you giving us your time today, Dave. In terms of Galen Data, their information is here on the screen, email, phone number, website, it's all right here. Don't forget about the handouts in the handout section. But again, thanks, Galen, and Dave, thanks so much for your time today, and hope everyone has a
Thank
great
you.
rest of the day.